Amazing. All right, welcome everyone. I am really, really excited for today's conversation because not only is it a fellow Canadian, which it's so nice to hear a little bit of home, but I love, love, love your work, Jake. And it's really, really exciting to see the ideas of trauma, accessibility, and access to inclusive and brave spaces being talked about in ways that I don't know that we really see over here in New Zealand as much. So it's really, really cool to be able to pick your brain and dive into some of these things with you. So, first, I would love to know a little bit more about you, the work that you do, and how you got into the arena that you're in now.
Oh my gosh, thank you. That was a really, really heartwarming introduction. Thank you. I wonder if people can hear my smile, so to speak. I am grinning ear to ear. Thank you, Amanda. My name is Jake Ernst, and I am a child and adolescent trauma therapist in Toronto, Canada. And in my work, primarily, I work with young people, but I do work with young people and their families as well. Working with young people, it's just really important to involve the full family unit, especially given that a lot of my work is relational. In that a lot of my work is centered around the relationship as the healing spot, as like that, the source of renewal, of growth, of change, of I'm just such a firm believer that we shouldn't do it alone. And as a social species, I just really believe in the power of connection and the power of healing together. So suffice to say, so my work is relational, it is trauma informed, it is attachment based. And in my work, a lot of what I really do try to center is the concept of safety. Safety is absolutely imperative to our well-being. We need to feel safe in order to feel well. So I would say that's probably the foundations for my work. And I'm not sure if I used, some words that perhaps people are new to some people, which I'm happy to kind of get into those pieces too, if it is.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm among family with you. I
Yeah.
feel like we connect.
Absolutely. And I love that you've got that awareness that we can get into these things and I could just nerd out on this stuff for days. But there is those people who are like, okay, well, what does relational mean? What is attachment? What does that mean in terms of, I guess, understanding and creating safety? Because those words are so crucial, but a lot of the time we're like, oh, relationship, okay, but what's the nuance to that? What even is relational, and within that, what does it mean to have that attachment?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And mainly because I think that in a lot of ways we can understand these words like through like the language and like the definition that's attached to them.
Yeah.
And I think that it takes an extra layer and like you said, more nuance to be able to understand those words from the felt experience. Right. So to actually have experienced those things is
Mhm.
different than just having like done an educational seminar on them or just sort of like heard about it, from a teacher or like, a professor or a trainer or something like that. I think it's so much different to experience them. And so relational really does just describe, actually, and safety as well. Those are both felt experiences. Those are experiences that we have that are just foundational to our wellness. And a lot of the time, part of the challenge with that is that when we don't experience that in early life, then we are stuck or we're forced to figure out how to do that alone, usually as we get older. And that's why I think it lends itself to sort of the nuance that you described in that, like, yeah, it's important to have a definition, like actually have to have language attached to it, but like to pair that with the felt experience is a whole other ball game, right?
Yeah, big time, big time. Because what I find in a lot of the work that I do in trauma informed yoga, a lot of it comes into that space of helping people rediscover that felt sense. Because I
Hmm.
think what we don't necessarily realize sometimes is that detachment from feeling into our bodies, feeling into relationship and connection. Because there's, for some people, like I can articulate what I feel when I'm in a safe connection with someone. And for some people, they're like, wait, what does that mean? What do you mean feel safety? Isn't that just like a context of I'm in a house, so I'm safe? It's like, well, no, there's the whole essence of being in connection. So if you're working with somebody who's maybe experienced that, maybe they've experienced the detachment or dissociation, as we would say, how do we rediscover safety again? Like I can see it from that yoga side, but when you're in the different modalities that you're working with, how does somebody re-experience that or experience it for the first time maybe?
Yeah, it's a challenge, right? And it's a relational challenge, right? Because if we're trying to feel something that perhaps something that we never felt before, how do we know what to look for, right? How do we know what it looks like, feels like, sounds like, you know, and how do we know that that it's exactly what we need? And the challenge, I think, especially with something like safety or even just like relationality, right? So like connection with another person. Um, when we haven't experienced that, there's like I said, there's not we don't have that like inborn kind of roadmap for what it's supposed to feel like. And so in a lot of ways, um uh co-regulation, so like being able to regulate like with another person
Yeah.
is such a foundational element to being able to know what that experience of safety or relationality feels like.
Mm.
And when we don't experience co-regulation, so co-regulation for just some people who maybe are new to that word, co-regulation is really just about using our own nervous system to help someone else's nervous system become calm,
Yeah.
and either become calm again or just to calm even for the first time. So that's why skin to skin contact for newborns is so important, right? Just for that co-regulation element. And so uh, co-regulation is a prerequisite for self-regulation. So being able to actually like self-regulate and to regulate by ourselves, we need to know what that feels like and we need to know what that experience is. And so that's why co-regulation is its own prerequisite for self-regulation. And so when we have an experience really early in life, especially really early in life,
Yeah.
when we haven't experienced that co-regulation or that attunement or the safety that comes along with being connected to somebody else, then we're stuck again having to figure out how to do that into adulthood. And so any attempts at self-regulation without co-regulation as a prerequisite is
Mm.
just a survival response. Any attempt at self-regulation, so being able just to like by ourselves try to regulate without the actual like social the sociality or like the relationality of another person being present to start at the very beginning,
Mm.
um, is just us enacting out a stress response.
Yeah.
And so
Mm.
I guess that's part of the challenge, right? In being able to again go back to like feeling it, right? How do you know what to look out for if you've never felt it before?
Exactly. And I couldn't imagine what it must be like right now helping people through these challenges and these kind of obstacles, I guess, especially in our current climate with pandemic, with people having to go into isolation. Like if somebody's new to co-regulation and they're like, well, wait, I'm actually on my own. How do we navigate that? Because I think there's a lot of people, there's so much talk about mental health and trauma, especially in the wake of this pandemic. Like we're talking about it so much more, which is beautiful. But now people are like, well, I don't know what my resources are. I don't really know, how do I navigate this if I am on my own? And I think that's where I would really love to bring in your routes of safety because I just think it's so powerful. Like when I saw that, I was like, yes, thank you. More of this. So I guess a million questions in one, basically. Tell us all about routes of safety, as well as how it is that people can start to navigate their own exploration of finding safety, whether they be on their own right now or whether they have a smaller circle that they're working with.
Yeah, wow. So let me just set the foundation here before I build the house. I feel like some of the foundational elements are like really again knowing what that embodied
Mm.
form of safety can look like and feel like, right? So that's number one. Number two would really just sort of be about being aware of the power of the corrective emotional experiences that safety provides us. Um, a corrective emotional experience not only can, like, repair attachment trauma or like repair just trauma in general,
Mhm.
but being able to have a corrective emotional experience allows us to repattern a nervous system that is um, acting in a way that perhaps on the outside people may look at that and sort of say, oh, like that's this kind of disorder, or like this is this kind of problem.
Mhm. What
But
an example
so
would that be?
so an example of that would be like, for example, like when people shift into fight, flight, or freeze, like really quickly. Some people may be really quick to label that like a panic disorder, for example. Or if someone is, let's say, as a result, their behavior like may have more emotionality to it, like that maybe get labeled as something like borderline personality disorder, right? And so when I kind of reframe that, I sort of just say, well, actually, this is um, a really good nervous system doing its job, and a really good nervous system actually just producing some discomfort or producing some
Mhm.
dis-ease, as it were. And so when we kind of take those principles into practice, we can actually sort of see that, well, okay, so what are some of the foundational components, or what actually what are the large barriers that get created in order to actually achieve that work, right?
Wow.
And unsafety is a big factor in that, and largely that's because our cultural understanding of safety is largely to do with like physical safety, right? Like if you're a parent, you're kind of really watching out for like, is my child safe or unsafe? At work, it's very much about like health and safety, right? Like, and so we don't get to really talk about like the emotional components of safety.
Mhm.
And so safety I usually just define as a safe, as a nourishing experiencing that we can have with ourselves and with our nervous system. And
Mhm.
so I created the roots of safety as kind of a roadmap, as kind of like a little toolkit to help people get to the place that they're looking for. And so really, there are 8 different routes of safety, and it's kind of like the love languages a little bit, in that everyone probably maybe has their preferred route, their preferred pathway to accessing an inner sense of safety. And then maybe we have like kind of our backups that we kind of default to when things are really tough.
Mhm.
And so the roots of safety model is like an eight um, and there are 8 different routes of safety. And so basically, all of those routes are different and unique, actually, in ways of returning that and restoring that sense of safety to our
Mhm.
bodies and just to ourselves and to our relationships too, because it is a relational uh, uh, tool for sure.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I think that that corrective measure is so important to highlight because so often when we have a reaction to something, in the wake of that, quite often we feel bad about it. We're like, "Oh, I
Hmm.
really shouldn't have snapped like that," or I overreacted here. I was too emotional and this and that." And it's like, well, actually, if we can remember that our nervous system is truly doing this magical job of trying to keep us balanced and alert and aware and safe. It's trying to protect us at the end of the day, and sometimes it does things and we're like, "Oh, was that really the
Yeah.
reaction that I wanted?" But if we can look at it in that way of, "Well done, nervous system. Like, thank you for being here in this moment and doing what you thought was best." And then it's once we can acknowledge that, I think that was my biggest thing. I really had to acknowledge that my nervous system was doing its job. And then I could build safety into that. And then I could say, okay, for next time, maybe I can pause and really notice that reaction rather than dive into it. And that's not to say it happens each time. Sometimes you react and you're like, okay, yeah, that was either a triggered response or an activated response. And I think that's so crucial. And I love that we can normalize the fact that we all react and respond in different ways at different times. And I think that's really, really important because that to me is how we develop our relationship with ourselves. Because we say, okay, you've got me and I've got you, like with ourselves. And then we branch out and invite other people into that circle, as it were. So I really, really love that. So have you found people, I guess, maybe struggling with this concept or struggling with these resources in this wake of the pandemic? Like, what is that looking like in the work that you do? Because that's got to be tough.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of the 8 different kind of routes of safety, there are many, many, many ones that like this pandemic has really just rocked, right? Like has really just like left us so unsettled and so dysregulated and so energized and activated just around like all these different points, right? That we're just being having to face with. And a lot of that truthfully just comes from the newness of it all, right? Like just comes from the fact that like to our nervous system, this is just such a new threat, right? It's such a new danger that it's contending with.
Yeah.
And so it's goes back to that, like it's a good nervous system just producing a really bad experience, right? It's producing a really bad and uncomfortable result as a result of it just trying to also make sense of it and also try to figure it out. And so particularly the root of safety that it I would say that it most um, upsets, let's say, is the structure and certainty route. And in our structure and certainty route, that is the route that like really does like allow us to feel so safe and so regulated just by having some structure and having a routine and having some certainty. And with the pandemic, like all that is just thrown right out the window, isn't it? Like it's just there's just not much more structure, not much more certainty, and we're really desperately trying to hold on to it. So if you are, kind of listening to this and you're kind of thinking like, "Oh my gosh, that's me," like I'm feeling that way. Like number one, you are not alone, sister. But number two, like it is just such a common experience because it's so new to our system.
Yeah, yeah, like, massive. We've literally never had to live through something like this, and we're like, "I should be
Yeah.
doing better, I should be
Right.
on top of the
Right.
laundry," and it's like, "No, dude,
Right.
there can be mountains of laundry right now, it's okay, because we need to figure out how we're navigating this." And I think that's the other really fascinating part that I'm noticing is everyone is experiencing this time so differently, country to
Yeah.
country, city to city, really close proximity to really far away. It's all so vastly different. But what's not different is the ways in which we can start to cope with it, the ways in which we can actually start to do some sense of relief for ourselves and for our community. And it is things like finding maybe a new routine. Maybe it's like your cup of coffee in the morning is something to anchor to. And that's like, that was when this all first started. I was like, okay, coffee, like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
sweet. And that was my structure because I didn't know what else was happening, but I was like, I need this. And it is maybe finding new and different ways. Have you found that any of your routes of safety have shifted or changed over this time? Is there anything new that you're like, I didn't
Yeah,
expect that?
absolutely. Yeah, for
Mhm.
sure. And I feel like so it's interesting. I do a lot of relational work. I do a lot of teaching about the importance of relationship, but I am just like such an introvert. Like I am such an alone time person.
Yeah.
And over the course of this pandemic, like I have just really missed being social. I didn't realize like the depths to which like I really am like an extroverted like I just really do need to like be around other people and it does make me feel like really good.
Mhm.
And so I feel like that has kind of also just kind of shifted my understanding of myself, which is of course like a nice little lesson. But
Mhm.
the other thing that it's also really shifted for me too and really challenged me to like to think about more is that just like the really like the value that comes along with slowing down and just sort of taking things slow. Like I operate at a pretty like calm, even space, just typically. But I would say that, and part of the part of the way that that looks, it shows up in my personality in a very particular way, but it also shows up in like my hustle or like my grind or like my business in a different way. Like I would say that as a way to compensate for that, I have overcompensated by staying busy to stay regulated and like keeping super busy and working lots, right? And so it just has really reminded me about like that of course those things can exist at the same time, that I can be a calm person and also like a lot of the ways in which I regulate and like keep my body
Yeah.
um um at ease and keeping a lot of the anxiety at bay is through just keeping busy. So I would say it has really shifted sort of my ideas of pace and rhythm and balance for sure, which
Mm,
has been a nice like lesson to learn for sure.
yeah,
I also wanted to mention something too that you were sort of getting at, which is something that I call habit hacks. Have you ever heard of like habit hacking? Like um,
it's so
just
cool.
like just like finding like new and like important ways just to kind of like shift up a routine or like learn a new one in kind of like a really like cheap and easy way. And so one that I've started doing is just giving myself permission to like not having any like no, there are no pandemic expectations that I carry right now. Like if like you said earlier about the laundry, like if the laundry's piling up, like it's piling up, right?
Yeah.
Like if I have to run the dishwasher twice, like the dishwasher's getting run twice. Like I'm not going to sit here and like hum and haw about, my worthiness just based on like, you know, how much I can accomplish or how much I can get done. So I've really released myself from this like pandemic productivity that I think a lot of people have faced throughout this
Right.
time too.
Yeah, big time. That makes me laugh because the habit hacking, when I first started reading, who is it, James Clear, his Atomic Habits book.
Atomic habits, yeah.
Yeah, when I first read that, it was kind of when the whole pandemic thing was starting, and I was in this kind of space of not only overwhelm, but like the slowing down and everything just getting stripped away. And I was like, okay, well, what do I do? And then I found that I got into these really like not so cute habits. And I was like, okay,
Uh-huh.
we gotta shift.
Uh-huh.
So there was one where I was like getting in this habit of watching RuPaul's Drag Race. And I was like, well, it's a great habit to have, but like slow your roll. Like
Uh-huh.
just one
Uh-huh.
episode. So there I got into this like habit kind of stacking, I guess, where I was like, okay, if you're gonna watch an episode of RuPaul, then you need to do 15 push-ups. Then you get to watch the show. It was kind of like this coupling of, okay, how are we gonna make this work? Because I was like, well, I'm not giving up RuPaul. So that's number one.
No,
Yeah.
no, you can't give up RuPaul. That would
No,
be offensive.
exactly. Yeah,
I love that.
that's for sure. So then I coupled those things. And it was again that kind of that ease on myself of being like, no, that's what's making you feel grounded right now is watching that show and just taking your time by yourself. How can you add something healthy to it? It wasn't something crazy like go run 15K, but it was coming back to like, but still take care of yourself and still respect and acknowledge both sides of the coin and all of this. So I really love that. That's so good.
Yeah, I mean it's so important, right? Like just to be able to like and kind of as you said before, like not only just like a moment for like building our relationship with ourselves, but like really just getting to know ourselves in like such a unique and new way, right? Like
Yeah.
I hate like the toxic positivity kind of framework that sort of says like, oh, like find the good thing in the moment, like a global pandemic. I think that's gross. But like
Yeah.
I do think that there is something to be said about like, all the lessons we did learn in a year like 2020 that was just so riddled with change and upheaval and growth in many different forms. And
Yeah.
uh, not that there's always a time to find a lesson in everything, but like I do think that more than one thing can be true at the same time, so to speak.
Exactly. Like this can be so challenging and somewhat debilitating, and it can also teach and learn. Like we can
Yeah,
hold those things and acknowledge both and say,
yeah,
yes, I don't know how I'm going to get through it. And here's what I'm figuring out about myself or learning about whatever. And I think that's really, really important to acknowledge our dualities and our polarities and all of the different things that
hmm,
can be true. We can be in a space of feeling into like deep, deep sadness, even in that depressive state, and also smile. We can have
hmm,
both of those because I think we get so caught up in, oh, if I'm this one thing, this label, I have to be that. So if I'm
yeah,
this really stressed out person, I always have to be stressed and I can never be calm and still. Well, you can be both and be okay in both of those moments. And I think that's a really big thing that I had to learn for myself for sure, but it's a conversation that I have with more and more people. They're like, "Oh, well, I always feel so guilty when I take this time for myself because people think I'm such an overachiever." And it's like, "Great, keep overachieving and like chill. You're allowed
yeah,
to do both." Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't it so fascinating to just like sort of not only just like the conditioning piece, like where we learned that from, but like in my work with a lot of young people, like um and I think that for me it always kind of strikes me just due to some of the concrete thinking that happens at that stage in development.
Mhm.
But when you when you kind of like open kids up to like this new like possibility, they're like, oh, wait, I can smile too, or while I'm feeling sad, like, or like, wait,
Yeah.
it's not just gonna stay this way forever. What, like there also can be like other endpoints,
Yes.
and new starting points. Like it's so nice, like, right, like there's just so much like authenticity that comes from figuring that out for the first time. I think like being able to be more than one thing, to allow more than one things to be true, like all that kind of thing. It's
Yeah.
quite nice, quite
What a
liberating
humbling
actually.
experience too, right? Because I can only
Yeah.
imagine, like, for myself, when I hear that, I'm like, yeah, I find a rigidity over time where it's like, this is
Yes.
it. This is where I'm
Yes.
headed. This is what I do. And then there's
Yes.
that moment where it's like, and you can teach an old dog new tricks. So
Yes.
what else? And then
Yes.
what?
And it's fascinating too because like, our while we maybe stop looking for newness and for change, like our nervous system certainly does not, right? Like our nervous system is constantly on the lookout for like newness and like
Yeah.
um that's sometimes why I don't always use like kind of like the I use it often in my teaching, but like the safety and threat kind of binary.
Mhm.
Sometimes I like to kind of collapse that binary a little bit and just sort of call it newness because like in a lot of ways, like our nervous system really is just so authentic and it really is so like well intentioned, right? Like it really does just sort of have like this really um what's the word? Just sort of like a really like primary level, like a very primitive kind of aspect to it that is just so honest, right? Like I just picture it as this like little kid that is just like, is this it? And you're like, no, that's uncomfortable. Don't do that. And then it's like, okay, well, how about this? Like,
Yeah.
well, don't go there. That's scary. Like it has such like a um maybe you can help me with the language here, but it just seems to be like just so genuine, like
He was an
young,
innocent.
authentic innocence.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally it. That's the word I was looking for.
They're just not, because it's not like it's trying to sabotage you. It's not
No,
trying to
no.
ruin anything or make you look bad and humiliate you.
Mhm,
What it's
mhm.
trying to do is it's just like, here I am doing the best I can. Is this a good thing? And you're like, oh God, no. Okay, is this? And then it's exactly that. It's that moment of, okay, how can I show up best for you? You're like, God, I don't even know.
It's
Yeah.
like that little toddler who's just like showing you all their brand new toys, right? That's just
Yeah.
kind of like, hey, like can this be validated? Like, can I keep this?
Yeah.
Can this stay around? And it's an
Oh,
interesting conversation, not only just for compassion, but like even just for like thoughts and feelings in general, right? The ones that you give the most attention to are the ones that are gonna stick, right? The
yeah,
ones that the all those neurons that fire together, those are the ones that are gonna wire together, so to speak, right? And
exactly.
so the paths that are and the routes that are the most well traveled are the ones that are going to be the first ones that are accessed during times of difficulty.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
It reminds me of, especially when you bring in the toddler imagery to it, it reminds me of, if you've ever played with a kid and if you've ever, I guess in comedy movies they do it too, where the kid like does something and everyone laughs, so then they keep doing that thing and they're like, look, I made everyone laugh, I'm going to keep doing this thing. It's the
yes,
same kind of thing. It's like that, if you want to chalk it up to dopamine or like whatever you want to say, but it's
yeah,
the same kind of thing. The nervous system is like, oh, we got a good response, let's keep doing that. Oh, we got a
yes,
negative response, maybe we need to work away from that. Like that's all we're trying to
totally,
do. So in those moments,
totally.
it's like, okay, have a little compassion. Just a little kid trying to navigate my way through this world.
It's
Which,
so it's so in like it's so endearing, isn't it? Right? Like
yeah,
I in a lot of my teachings about safety, I usually talk about safety in two kind of forms. So like safety as like safety seeking, so like approaching something safer,
yeah,
and then also threat avoidance, right? So like avoiding something that is dangerous.
yeah,
And oftentimes like um we usually only understand safety in terms of like fight flight freeze, right, or like danger in terms of like just avoiding threats, but it's so much more nuanced and complex than that, that like even something as simple as like shifting into like a meditative state, or even just like rest and digest mode, right? So that is still sort of like a going into that the dorsal vagal sort of space that is the exact same nervous system state that like depression, dissociation, like shutdown, like all the it's still the exact same
Yeah,
state, right? And it really is just about like, well, is our nervous system approaching safety or is it avoiding danger,
exactly.
right? And
Mhm.
so when it's avoiding danger, like that's when we fall into the threat avoidance sort of categories. And sort of when you kind of align it and map it out, like it actually is the exact same for each one. They all have kind of their not necessarily the opposite, but it does line up.
Yeah,
Even something like the social safe and social mode in like kind of like a more ventral vagal like nervous system response. um, that can also be matched with sort of the threat avoidance response that still happens in like when you're still present and you're still like safe, but when you're kind of shifting into like crisis mode, right? So like being able to like, or even something uh like altruism, like extreme altruism, like if you sort of see someone like crossing the street and you kind of like rush in to save them, like that's the exact same nervous system state that you're in when you're like having like a pleasant conversation with somebody, right?
right?
And so it's so beautiful, right? Like it's so nuanced, and often it can be perceived as like so opposite, but
Mhm.
it's quite fascinating.
It is, and I think that's where there's almost kind of like this demonizing of it. It's like, "Oh,
Yeah,
stress is
yeah,
bad, fight and flight is bad, it has to
yeah,
be rest and digest." Well,
yeah,
you literally have to have both in order to
yeah,
be living, like, you need the inhale, the exhale, you need both. You need that ebb and flow between to keep yourself balanced. And it's okay when we go into a state of stress, and it's okay when we go into those lower affect spaces, and we dance between them. And I think that's
hmm,
where there's less of that, oh, this is bad, this is whatever. If we can remove the labels and see it as, okay, what is my lived experience right now? What am I feeling? What am I doing? How can I better understand my own dance within it all? Because how
yeah,
I dance through my nervous system is going to be completely different to how you do, to how someone else does XYZ. But it's that space of really just acknowledging that it's all within us. All of these levels and layers are in everyone, and we navigate them in such a way that we perceive to be best, or that our nervous system
yeah.
perceives to be best. And I think that's so, oh, there's so much goodness in this. I'm like, do you have the next 10 hours to just talk about this? So good.
Totally, and you know, like I love the analogy that you're bringing to us, because I think that isn't that whole concept of a dance, like isn't that just such a nice analogy for life, right? Like in my work about with people in relationships, like we're always like dancing in and out of rupture and repair, and figuring out new ways to like um repair any kind of wrongdoings that we've done. And but then also like we are also human, so of course like we're going to like contribute to like ruptures that we maybe are not even intentionally placed. And so there, I love that, like the dance element that you brought, because again it also just adds so much permission for us to be our full selves, and not just the ones that are the most like socially desirable, or the ones that are like the ones that are perfect, or the ones that have it all together. It adds so much more space and permission just to like be human, and to like mess up, and to like not feel so shitty and ashamed about it.
Yeah, yeah,
It's quite
I
nice.
love that. I love that. So if you were to, well, I guess let's speak to everyone listening. If somebody is sitting there right now and they're like, okay, this is all new to me. I don't know how I necessarily even perceive safety. Do you have like three, like the first three things that you would do or offer to someone if they're like, okay, I know that I get really worked up or really stressed about things? What are the first three things that I could do to help start to regulate and start to come back to a sense of groundedness?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think I would say that the first one is stop researching. Stop being in pursuit.
Put it down.
Put the book down. Stop being in pursuit of more information, because more information is actually not what we're talking about. Having more information at this point is in your life is probably not going to get you as far as something as simple as listening to your breath right now might.
I
Um,
love that.
so so I would say my suggestion would be to put the book down and look at the very vast and rich resource that you have in front of you, which is your own body. The body is the best laboratory for doing this work. It is like a healthy dose of like experiment and passion and permission, and like it is just the best landscape. So really I would, number one, like say stop outsourcing your knowledge and start insourcing it and try to find what is true for you and what is, because again, like as long as we're looking outside for the answers, like we're just not going to find the whole picture. There are of course resources out there that hold a mirror up to ourselves and we're like, hey, that's true, or like, hey, that's my experience, but nothing is going to be more true than what you're actually living and what you're actually experiencing. So the second one I would say, maybe I'll just pause and let that sort of simmer.
There's yes,
That one's pretty, that's pretty uh
everything.
rich, right? Like if honestly, like if that was the only takeaway that people had from our conversation, maybe you heard some new words that you're going to go look up, but like also like
Yeah.
I just firmly believe that as humans we are not a constant work in progress and we are not a constant self-improvement project, and we just don't always have things to be working on or changing, right? And
Yeah.
part of the work is just sitting with what is and accepting where
I
we're at.
I feel like you're speaking directly to me. So
I
thank
am.
you.
It's
Yeah.
only you.
Only
Only you.
oh god. Yes, let's wait. Yes. Yes. I can read my way, podcast my way, talk my way through everything. And no, I'll
Hmm.
find the answer. I'll find this.
Uh-huh.
And that was one of the biggest reasons why I got into this work. So I was like, girl,
Yeah.
it has to be this. Am I
Yeah.
breathing quickly? Am I breathing slow?
Yes.
Where am I holding tension in my body? Like how does
Yes.
my digestion feel? Am I feeling like stuck
Yes.
and stagnant? Am I feeling open and expansive? Like, what is that? No book can tell me.
All of it. All of it. Oh, it's
I
so
love
good.
that. So I
I'm
mean,
saying
that's
yes,
everything.
queen, to that.
Yeah, that's so done. You're welcome, everyone. Like, we
Right,
done.
you have your answer.
Yeah,
Well, so here's the thing. I think that message can either be received one of two ways. Either you have sort of the reaction of like, oh, like shoulders drop. Thank you so much for giving me that permission. That's exactly what I need. Or it can be quite actually dysregulating to be like, well, wait, like how do I? Well, what questions do I ask? Like, what happens when I look in and I don't like what I
yeah,
feel and I don't like what I see and I don't like what's looking back, right? So
been
I
there.
also want to create multiple realities to also be true. And the only true reality is the one that you're experiencing right now.
Mm,
Um, and I guess probably in addition to that, because you asked for three, my need for structure and certainty, I'm like, I have to finish the two. So the next one that I would guide folks towards is the breath. The breath is the number one um, truth teller. I really just think that there is just so much honesty and so much truth that is packed right into our breath. You'll find that the nervous system, or sorry, the breath is as shallow as the nervous system is overstimulated. So if you
mm,
find a way to kind of sink into your breath and you're noticing that it's not very deep, that's probably a big indicator to you that, the nervous system is working very hard,
yeah.
right? And finding a way to like really like sink into that breath and really kind of deepen it as best as possible is always going to be really nourishing and really helpful. So the breath is kind of a remote control for the body and the brain, and it really is our friend, even though it may not feel that way.
Mhm.
um, and then the last one I just want to share with people, just because it's so important, which is to drink water. I'm not a doctor, but I do know that drinking water and getting really good sleep is just so, so, so important and so helpful. And again, those are two really good choices that we can make for ourselves. So,
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. Hydration is key.
yes.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Because look at a plant. If you don't water a plant, what happens? We
I
also
know,
need
right?
water. We do.
You
And the
know what? Actually, and the breath. And so actually with both of those things, and part of the reason why I do share them, so this was actually shared with me by one of my indigenous teachers who I've had the privilege to learn with and learn from. And so
Mhm,
now I share this and I pass this teaching along to you. But the reason why I share about the breath and about water is because I learned from an indigenous knowledge keeper that everything you put into your body, the body is going to learn is its medicine. And so everything that comes in, whether that be like the thoughts we tell ourselves, the food that we consume, the water that we drink, the breath that we give ourselves, even just like the TV shows that we watch, like it is all medicine, and the body's going to treat it that way, right? And so if we are pumping it full of alcohol in order to like regulate our feelings, like the body's going to learn that that is the medicine that it needs, right? Same with caffeine, same with sugar, same with all those
mhm.
things, right? That of course get demonized and scrutinized.
Yeah.
But I do just think that like really understanding ourselves as like needing that medicine is just really important too.
I really love that idea around the body learns that it's medicine, because quite often we hear it in the way of like food is medicine, period. And that's kind of the adage. But that kind of eliminates everything else that we surround ourselves with, that we ingest and consume, whether it be media, whether it be food, alcohol, stimulant, anything, the books that we read, the whatever. And I think that's such an important reminder that our bodies are so smart, but they are
Smart.
interacting with us. We're in
Mhm.
relationship with them. So what we're giving them, they do learn that, okay, that's what we have to work with. So what are we going to do? And that's why the change can be so uncomfortable as well, like when you start to make the
Yes.
shift. And I think if
Yes.
we could find a little bit more compassion in that transition, we would be so much better for it. Because I think a lot of the time when people either start to eat healthier or they start to get into nature more, like whatever their shift is, there's a readjustment period. The
Yeah.
body has to now recalibrate and rediscover this new health point. And that takes time and patience and
Hmm.
compassion. And a lot of times you're like, oh, this just isn't working. I'm like, it's been 2 minutes. Keep going. Come on.
Yes.
Like, give
Yes.
some time. Yeah.
Yeah, the body definitely talks back, that's for sure. It'll let you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just depends, like, are you listening or not?
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and staying in that dialogue and really being curious about what's coming up. Absolutely.
Hmm.
I have so many questions and so much to dive into, but I will respect your time. I won't keep you here forever. I've got one more question because I'm so curious where you're gonna take this one. I usually can have a little bit of a gauge, but I have no idea what you're gonna say, and I'm so excited for that. So if you think of either the local community or the global community, is there one big norm that you would wanna see disrupted or one big change that you would wanna see made? Like, what's that one thing where you're like, "This." What is it and why?
Oh, wow, what a good question.
It's my favorite.
Um, I would say that the one I really need people to know that kindness is king. Like kindness, like really, really, really is like that universal medicine. Like
Mm,
I I I I don't know that I've met a lot of people that don't understand that as well, of all ages, of all experiences. I think that everyone feels good when kindness is a part of the equation. And I just think that in so many ways, like we've lost that relationality, and we've lost that like really core fundamental social skill
yeah.
of like and to be clear, I'm not talking about like assume positive intent kind of bullshit. I'm just talking about like just being a kind person and just like really just being kind, you know, kind in our assumptions of ourselves, kind in our expectations of ourselves, kind in the ways in which we speak to ourselves and the ways that we speak about others, like
Mhm.
really basic, like kind of kindergarten level kindness
Yeah.
teachings, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think we could really transform the world just with some more love. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah, and
trying
it's
not to
free.
like sound so like, yes, it's free, right? And I'm trying not to sound so like hooey dooey here, but I just really do think that if we boil it down to like a developmental like core like skill, I think that
Mhm.
like that has really been lost, and like we just really do like treat each other just like with so much disrespect.
And it's
And that is
rampant.
something that, yeah,
Yeah, like, it's really, really prevalent, and I think when we look at the majority of the issues that we have, it does come down to that level of disrespect. If we think about climate change, it comes
yeah,
down to the unkindness in our relationship with Mother Earth. If we think about the wars that are started, the protests that are occurring, it all comes down to people not being treated with basic human decency.
you got it.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
why aren't we doing that? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
where did that go? And
Mm-hmm.
I get so curious about that so often of it's our innate nature. Like that's our essence. That's at a fundamental level,
Yeah,
that's that pure intent. So it's easier to be kind. So where is that disconnect? What happens? And then I look at it on a systems and structures level, and I look at like everything that we have just bearing on top of us in so many different ways. And we get really tired and exhausted and fed up with the way things are. But it has to come back to that living by example, really, that space
yeah.
of what kind thing can I do and how can I show up in honesty, really, and just be
Mm-hmm.
in that space of remembering relationship
Yes,
with self, others, and earth. Absolutely.
yes. It really is contagious, isn't it? Like it really is just like so
Absolutely.
like fundamental to being well and feeling well. And I just we need each other. And so like my second answer probably would have been something along those lines around like don't forget like the importance about connection. Like
Mhm,
we need each other. So
mhm.
don't give up on people. We're the only thing we have, so don't give up on people.
Yeah, and that's our essence as well, is that community. Like, we came from
Yeah.
tribes. It was keeping
Yeah.
our tribes healthy, happy, and surviving.
Hmm.
It is there's that deep, deep need to come back to that because it's been really lost, really, really lost, and
Yeah.
it's fundamental. It's crucial in every aspect. And I really, really appreciate that. It's not hooey, it's not woo woo. Kindness is
Yeah.
it. Like that just is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've loved being in relation with you, my friend. It has
Oh, it's been
been a
such a
pleasure.
pleasure. Yeah. Thank you so, so much for your time. We're going to link out to where people can find you and where they can learn more about the routes of safety, where they can learn more about the work that you do and the way that you're coming forward into this world. And I just think if we can have more conversations like this and inspire those ripples, I am here for it. So thank you so, so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so.